Welcome back to the football betting tips and strategies series. Guys, we smashed the like target on the last video where we looked at the best football betting strategy. So in this video, we're going to follow up with part 2 and look at what in-game factors you should be looking for to make sure that the bets you make are certified winners. If you didn't see the first video, I recommend to watch that first. But to summarize, this betting strategy is about betting the over on Asian corners markets from the 85th minute on in a game. Usually, if a game is at 10 total corners at the 85th minute, the Asian corners line will be at 11. So if we bet the over on the Asian corners line, we want the game to finish on 12 or more corners. The great thing about this bet though is if the game finishes on exactly 11 corners, your stake is refunded. The main scenario that we identified in that first video was where a favorite to win the game was either drawing or losing a game by the 85th minute. As their opponent sits back and closes off the central areas, this will result in the ball being in wider areas more often and the attacking team throwing more desperate crosses into the box, which would in turn generate more corners. So that's the crux of the strategy, but there's a lot more information in the first video if you want to check that out. But what we're looking at today is the 3 main things you should look for when analyzing a game to determine whether you should place a bet on the overs in the Asian corners market. There's 3 things that you should be looking out for, and those are corners, crosses, and possession. This allows you to focus not only on scenarios where a favorite is losing or drawing a game, but actually to analyze any game. And by doing that, it opens up the number of possible games that you can bet on in a weekend, and therefore the number of opportunities that you have to make profit. So the first thing we look for is corners, and this might be a bit self-explanatory, but if there aren't many corners in the game, especially in the second half, then it's a lot less likely that betting the over on the Asian corners market is going to hit. You will find some games with maybe only 1 or 2 corners in the second half, or maybe even 4 or 5 corners in the whole game. And these are the games that I generally tend to avoid when placing an over on the Asian corners market. So very few corners in the second half, and very few corners in the game overall. Corners, unlike other statistics, are related to what's already happened in the game. If there have been loads of corners in the game already, that indicates that the style of play of one or both of the teams is resulting in corners, and therefore we expect that to continue. Therefore, if there have been many corners up to the 85th minute, then betting the over on the Asian corners market is more likely to hit. This is different to something like goals, where you could have loads of goals in the first half and then none in the second half. If there have been loads of corners in the game so far up to the 85th minute, then expect that to continue and place the over bet. But if there haven't been many corners, then I would seriously suggest to avoid placing the overs bet. So we'll just take a quick example of this in the Newcastle versus Aston Villa game from the 2022-2023 Premier League season. By the 85th minute, Newcastle are winning 4-0, and there has only been 3 corners in the game by the 85th minute. So, as we said, low number of corners in the game, Newcastle are comfortably winning, there's no reason for them to commit any men forward. So what happens in the rest of the game? The game stays at 3 corners, so an overs bet here would lose, and you wouldn't even get your stake refunded. On the other hand, if we look at the Liverpool-Leeds game from the same season, at the 85th minute, it's 1-1. So Liverpool, being the favourite, are expected to push forward to try to win the game, and there has already been 15 corners in the game. By only considering the corners factor, we would want to bet over 16 Asian corners in the game. And what is the result? By the end of the game finishes on 18 corners, smashing the bet. The second factor that we look for is crosses. The best chance of a corner occurring is usually from crosses. The reason for this being, if a defender is trying to block a cross coming into the box, then sometimes that will go out for a corner. And if the ball does get into the box from a cross, in some cases, a defender trying to clear the ball out from the penalty area will put the ball out for a corner. So crosses generally give the best chance of a corner occurring. Specifically, what I'm looking for when analyzing a game is the number of corners in the second half. The reason why we're looking only at the second half is to take into account any tactical instructions that were given to the manager at halftime that only apply from the second half onwards. For example, a team could be playing in one way in the first half, putting loads of crosses into the box, and then at halftime the manager decides it's not working and decides to go for a more possession style of football and to work the ball into the box via short passes. So in that case, the first half data just becomes completely unreliable. So it's much better to focus on the second half to avoid any major shifts in tactical instructions that can occur at halftime. There's no fixed number of crosses in the second half to look out for, and it's something that you're going to find your own sweet spot by using this strategy over time. But as a general rule of thumb, I would say look out for 14 or more crosses for both teams in the second half. That's usually a good enough indicator. What is even better is if a single team alone has 10 or more crosses in the second half. If we go back to that Liverpool versus Leeds example, in addition to there being loads of corners in the game, both teams had 10 or more crosses in the second half up to the 85th minute. And we saw how that resulted in the over on the Asian corners market hitting. On the other hand, if we look at Brighton versus Manchester City from the same season, the game was tied 1-1 in the 85th minute. And as I mentioned in the original video, typically we would try to target these kind of games where a favorite is trying to win the game. So we should bet the over, right? But if we look at the number of crosses in the second half, there are only 10 total between both teams. So with only 6 corners by the 85th minute, the Asian corners line would be over or under 7. And guess what? The game ends on 6 corners. Another good thing to look out for is where the crosses are on the field. If the crosses are closer to the goal line, then that is a better indicator for potential future crosses. Crosses which come from deep aren't as good as generating corners. Still, I would look at the quantity of crosses in the first instance and then explore the position of those crosses for confirmation. And the last thing I look for is possession, and this is related to the situation in the game. If a team is drawing or losing a game by the 85th minute, we would expect them to commit more men forward in wide areas in search of the winner or the equalizer. And it is this team that we're expecting to get us the 2 corners after the 85th minute for our Asian corners bet to hit. But if the team can't hold on to possession of the ball and build up pressure on the opposition, then the wingers and fullbacks can't get into those advanced positions and reduces the likelihood of corners and therefore crosses occurring. Therefore, the last thing that I look for is a situation where a team is trying to come back into the game or to win a game and that they have demonstrated greater possession of the ball in the second half. And what I'm looking at here specifically is the passing statistics in the game in the second half, and just to make sure that they are better than their opponents. So in the first video, we looked at the strategy, and in this video, we've looked at the in-game factors you should be looking out for if you want to place a late game over Asian corners bet. To really test how well you can apply this ahead of the start of the new season, I suggest heading over to the Who Scored website and setting the slider for a number of games to the 85th minute, and based on the factors that we've discussed in this video, trying to guess whether an over Asian corners bet would hit or not. And like that, you'll be able to easily spot profit-making opportunities live in the new season. Thanks for watching, and until next time, goodbye.